Oh my goodness. Seriously, I have to just do it. It's like I can tell myself I don't have to think about things that don't matter.
I was designed to do those things. How the hell does this guy know this about me?
It's impossible to not see.
When Dan read for my sister, she was like, he's psychic. She's like, how does he know that?
Yes.
She's like, it's human design, guys. Like, it's just a testimony of how legit it is.
Seriously, Danny was like FBI or CIA. He's like, how the hell does this guy know this about me?
Having my chart read, there were just thing after thing after thing that I was just like, wow, that's me.
This man is reading me and I've never met him before.
I was in the midst of one of the biggest emotional waves I've ever been in my life, and he saved my life.
It seems like everybody has the same reaction. It's that aha moment, and they want to find out more. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Human Design Advantage podcast, our Wednesday night shows. I'm your co-host, Jen, and decoding the matrix for us is Danny Guru.
Thank you so much, Jen. It's good to be here.
Good to be here, too. How are you doing this evening?
I'm doing just fine. Just fine. It's nice and warm. It's warming up in the Northeast.
Yes. Well, I already told you earlier today we're getting another cold front here, so bipolar weather in Houston, Texas, but it's not out of the norm. So
The cold front doesn't stand a chance against you, Jennifer.
oh, you haven't seen me when it's really cold. You're cold. Well, if it's dry, it may be different, but the older I get, I really just want to move to the equator where it's the same temperature all year round.
All the time. That actually sounds appealing. I wonder if that appealed to our guest, who is subject of tonight. Named of warmer climates, Albert Einstein. We're doing Albert Einstein tonight, and I found so many fascinating things about his chart. He was just a fascinating man.
Yeah, I'm surprised we haven't done him yet. So I am really excited to be diving into his chart. But before we do that, guys, you know the drill. Please make sure you like, subscribe, and follow the show. And any links that you need will be in the description. If you're listening to this podcast, I did not upload it before the show, but I will upload it afterwards, the PDF for you to follow along. Sometimes you can't see what's on the screen, completely understand that. So there's a convenient PDF for you to be able to view it, whether you're listening or watching.
Pass it around with your friends too. This is going to be a good one. They're all really good ones. So if you're just waking up to human design even a little bit, start to get curious. The stuff we're talking about is genetically how Albert Einstein was wired. We'll be calling out what was up with the boy. He was a designer. I forgot my exact subtitle, but he was designed with some dumb luck, basically, where his genius could show up.
When the potential for greatness becomes realized.
Right. Yep. Every once in a while, that which the person is peeks out and bees itself. So let's look at Albert. Let's see who Albert is as himself. I like that. That's actually clumsy to say, and the bees themselves.
I did not know he was a Pisces.
Well, I mean, so Pisces, start with that a little bit if you don't mind. So Piscean energy is what we're in now, actually. The Piscean age.
No, we are in Aquarius energy. We won't be in a Pisces energy till around the 20th, I believe.
But we just moved out. Well, I'm saying like larger scale. We're moving out of this larger Piscean cycle, or if we already and moving into. So he was a man for his time. Yes. What is Pisces? Pisces means what?
Well, Pisces, they are the dreamers of the zodiac. So they spend a lot of time in, imagination. They are very psychic and intuitive. They are very strong empaths. And looking at his arrows in the chart, just seeing the top right arrow with
that's my variable.
Yeah, he definitely, that I can tell. I'm starting to notice I have that one. Yep. And I'm trying to pay attention to the astrology signs to see if it, I know the flavor comes out in the chart,
right?
But those two things right there can definitely tell me that he spends a lot of time in dream state. So if you look at the astrological signs as stepping stones to your soul's evolution, they say that Pisces, because it is the last sign, we've gone through all of the signs, all of the flavors of what each astrology sign brings in. So they're very wise old souls.
I wonder how many times Albert came back. I mean, we are in a program. Not every crystal consciousness leaves and comes back into a human form. Therefore, not everyone reincarnates, but many do. And so anyways, what we're looking at is the generative power to sustain. Let's start there. The generative power to sustain. And that describes Albert. He's sustained. He's got this, and there's a lot of generative juice on this body graph, even though there's only one definition going to it.
He's got all four motors.
Yeah, that was what I'm getting at. And so he's got all four motors. So endless, boundless energy to basically sustain. And so when people told him that's crazy, his ego would kick in and be like, I'll be first. When people tried to talk him out of it and get through to his dreamer side, that gate 30 that wanted to cling to a feeling and said, Albert, this won't feel the same way that you might want it to. Yep. Albert would go into a fantasy state and dream right past him. When people said, dude, you're just going to get stuck. You're just going to get stuck. His gate 60 and his root center said, I already am stuck. I'll accept it and transcend it. So I'm certain in his inner life, I'll always talk inner and outer, because in his inner life, there were times where I bet you he was an absolute bear to be around, stuck in his thing. He went through 2 wives, as I recall, and he had his share of playboyism, a little bit, but he kept it under wraps. Like, we didn't know much about his life, but I know he sort of dated some of his students. And just it was more than just like a wife and so forth. And what to expect? I mean, he's got that channel of recognition, which is 41 to 30, and this is highly experiential. And then it goes up to gate 36, doubly defined off the top of the solar plex, and that's the crisis before the sexuality when it comes to the human chemistry. So this man was currently in, like, looking over at the other mode, wondering, what's that like? What's that like? What's that like? But he had this other thing that would take him away from that for days and weeks at times. And that was his love of his numbers. So that brings me straight to his incarnation cross. 36-6 on the top right, the sun and the earth. And then 11 and 12 in the fourth line. Now these fourth lines, so they're unconscious in him. 11.4, 12.4. These are the prophet lines. The prophet, the guru, the teacher. These are the teaching lines of 2 of the 3 great teaching gates. There's really several, but there's actually 4 of them. 12 becomes a person of consequence, and they teach influentially. They articulate in the moment and drive a manifested impact. 11 on his design side is the ideas, the teacher, the prophet, the person who literally, I'm going to read 11.4 because 11.4 and 12.4 showed up, and because they were unconscious, he couldn't mess them up. He could ignore them. He could have lived without them. He could have lived past them. But because Albert Einstein was given basically most of his space that he needed, he was free to create. And once he did that, once he was beyond reproach, which didn't take him long, as he kept upcoming and upcoming, he suddenly had the confidence, and he certainly had the ego willpower to go it alone in the face of opposition until he could show up with the stuff that was provable. And, in the beginning, every scientist runs into their brick wall, right, of the other scientists that don't want to hear that you're about to break down, Isaac Newton and Copernicus and a couple others. You're going to twist them. We had it all neatly packaged, and now you're showing us how light bends. No good, Al. You're going to make us read all the books. And in reality, Copernicus and Galileo and Newton, they all incorporate right into the theory of relativity that Einstein brought forward. But
Those would be interesting charts to pull too.
yeah, Galileo is back in the both of them. It would be difficult. Both of them, I believe, were prior to 1781.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a real bummer. I want to go back in time and see people, and you can see it, but there are certain anomalies. So unconscious in him, 11.4. So the sun, his design sun, 11.4 is this. It's this condition, this a harmonic condition in the individual society that permits assessment before renewed action. This is the gate of ideas and the peace that comes when the ideas are able to be shared. And this harmonic condition is my ability as my individual self to share into society with rest in between. Basically, it's saying rest and then have ideas, rest and then have ideas. But these ideas are abstract. They're all 100% abstract. They didn't mean anything before, and then suddenly they meant something at the tail end of a realization. And so he was constantly having realizations of these great, amazing new ideas, and they were meant to be a teacher. This fourth line is called the teacher, the ability to express the essential nature of the idea. And really, it's called the essential nature of peace, but it's peace with the idea. Everyone makes peace with the idea. New ideas you're not at peace with. Hey, we have a new idea. We want everyone to get jabbed. Many of us were not at peace with that.
Right.
It turned out bad idea, so it didn't stick. If it's in the collective, it's got to survive the experience, and it's got to survive the challenge by logic. If it's in the collective, logic will challenge it sooner or later. If it's in the collective, the experience will challenge it too. Someone else will go to experience the same thing, and then they'll share their results. And if they're not the same, there's a challenge.
Yep.
Survived all of that, and that's how it's supposed to be. Again, we need our collective. We need our collective to be a collective and stop trying to be a tribe. Anyway, so this teacher is the sage that in the extreme can teach harmony to the tone deaf. Venus, which becomes the morals and the mores that this person will gestate throughout their life, is also exalted here, whereby it's the ability to teach out and attract the alienated. So basically, in his case, the alienated were the ideas. Hey, you got too many new ideas, Albert. You're just a clerk in a patent office. Quit upstaging my game. Quit, like what was that great movie that Robin Williams was in, where the kid did all the math? We talked about it. So this
I know what you're talking about.
Yep,
But it's,
yep.
guys, if you know what movie we're talking about, drop it in the comments, please.
Yeah. Concepts which are clear and transferable. It's the guru, basically, who becomes the guru of the ideas. And on the 12, where the impact gets made, so here's where it gets shared, and then the 12 is where the impact gets made. It's the fourth line. And 12 is this gate of standstill. It's caution. So when the caution subsides and the impact is ready, of course, the timing is right, that voice, which we'll get to on Sunday when we finish the gates of the throat center, that gate 12, its voice says, I know I can, if I feel like it. I know I can.
I have this one.
Yeah.
I have 11 too, but not my.
Think of how manifesting that is. That's very manifesty. Because when they don't feel like it, they're not in the mood. They don't. But when they know they can, they do. That's manifestor language. Essentially, now he would have to surrender to the generative box to give him, and the emotional wave to give him clarity. But when the clarity came, yeah, I know I can do that. I can crack this code. I can show you guys what that is. I can withstand your condemnation. I can hold steady here. This is all in his chart. And so 12, you're going to love this, the prophet, the ability to foresee and plan for the end of standstill. I have this line. It's always sitting there waiting, like a good fourth line should, waiting to become influential. That's the thing. These ideas and this caution that then can do something and articulate and teach, they're all in a fourth line. What do we know about fourth lines? They have a fixed nature. A fourth line design will show a fixed nature. It will show a desire to be friendly with people. Just friendliness, standard friendliness. So hard to get mad at them. The networker, the friendly networker that just wants to go along to get along. And basically, if someone is upstaging him or saying you're stupid, he'll abdicate to some degree in order to keep the network alive. Albert Einstein had his hooks and his claws into everything. They couldn't shake him off. His fixed nature would hook into them. Dude, how do you be rude to a friendly person? You're sick of them. It's, oh, dude, just shut up. I want to go. But you can't be rude because they're friendly. They're nice. They're sweet. Albert was generally sweet. It was hard for someone to truly get really pissed at him. He wouldn't stand for it for very long, by the way. And so, 12, sorry. Yes, the prophet, the ability to foresee the end of standstill. And the fourth line just wants to become influential at the end of the day. That's its drill. So it would like to articulate, make an impact, and share its influence. He was designed to articulate, make an impact, and share the influence of his ideas and make them become influential through his fixedness. So there was no taking Albert off of this, like a dog with a bone. It's the arousing of the stagnant for communal preparation, meaning it's about to be shared. The ability to foresee and express the need for some social interaction and to end the caution. When his formulas were finally succeeding and he could repeat them, it was time to end the standstill. All the rest of the time, gate 12 just wouldn't articulate. Half the time, he didn't even tell the other what he was thinking. The other half the time he did, by the way. Fourth lines talk. They just want to externalize.
And he's got that open throat, so he's going to feel that pressure to
speak and do more. Or, as we have seen, sometimes the open throat, when they're just insecure and not sure what to say, they'll say nothing.
Right.
So my guess is he did plenty of that. So this was his unconscious side, what he was incapable of stopping because it's unconscious. It's constantly pouring out of him. His ideas were taking him on a wild journey. And he must have loved that. By the way, every time I see a picture of Albert, he looks like he's staring into magic in Never Never Land. By the way, the non-pedophile Never Never Land, whereby, right, the nice one.
Yeah, thank you for specifying that.
Whereby it was like Lucy in the Sky with diamonds and
Yellow Submarine.
Blueberry skies and marshmallow skies and tangerine waterfalls. He just looks like he's looking into magic, where there's a unicorn in a dream and a genie about to grant him all his wishes.
The Pisces, he is probably because he's got that open head center, he's got an open ajna, so all of that dreaminess, the imagination, the figuring the things, the stuff that's going through his head that's flowing through here. Yeah, he probably spent a lot of time experiencing his internal world.
Absolutely.
Because it was magical.
Like magic. So when you take, let's add another layer to that magic. You take those two right-facing arrows on the right side of his body graph. So that's his whole personality, his view on the bottom and his actual mind, his personality, who he thinks he is the top arrow. So his view is just peripheral. He saw it all. And then it would all just come in. You take in the whole periphery, but it means he can't just focus and suddenly pull something out and do something strategic with that. Mm-hmm. He's not designed for that. He's designed to let it come in until his unconscious nature works it through and gives him an idea. If this were turned around, he wouldn't be the same person. If that 11 and 12 were on the sun side and the 12 and the 36 and 6 were on the design side, personality and design, I meant. So unconsciously, this stuff was pouring out of him. And then that right mind is just an open sieve. And because he had a defined ego, a love of self, gate 10, because he had his love of being, his love of his own body, because he had all these great dreams pouring out of his desire field, gate 41 to 30, because he had all the sacral juice, and a gate 5 that was guaranteed to fix patterns for him, and a gate 14 which is guaranteed to push a direction towards something that was more beautiful than before. And all of that was in his numbers. All of that were in his formulas. His beauty was in his formulas. I can imagine women that wanted to be close to him had to compete with his chalkboard, like heavily. Wouldn't you imagine? I mean, I know they did. I've heard the stories.
I wonder how many chalkboards he
wore down.
Yes, because when I get into my creative flow, I've got pads of paper. I ordered big presentation paper. I need a whole freaking wall of like dry erase. I'm even debating on looking at one of those pads that I can take notes on. And they didn't have that back then. So he probably went through a lot of freaking chalkboards.
Yeah. But when you take all this rightness on the personality side, what everyone sees, people see the leftness still to this day. They see the leftness, and they will for a generation or two until we truly keep waking up to this nature. So they would see Albert as the busy patent clerk with a busy body, busy hands, his brain that's always moving, telling him how smart he is, by the way.
Mhm.
And then, but only in response did he have the most brilliant thing to say. If he would try and shortcut that timing and speak out of turn, he would sound like he would get tripped up. He would feel like a ding dong. But he had that beautiful warrior ego and those fixed patterns and that sustained development pushing towards what he cares and what's going to make it all prettier, all more beautiful, aesthetically pleasing, more good for everyone, driving a human direction towards a new perfection. That's what he's designed to do. Last one was gate 27 and gate 14, I keynoted. And that ego of his wouldn't allow him to actually feel stupid. Not for very long. Open ego, and he could have suddenly doubted his worth and not been able to keep up with it. But defined ego, and suddenly what can he do? He can keep his commitment to himself. I'm doing numbers today. I'm doing numbers again today. I'm doing numbers again today. Over and over and over again, new formula. Don't bother me now, Martha. I'm working. Going through every equation there was until he died trying to unify all of the field theories that were possible to be unified, and he made it a lot of headway with it. So and quantum physics does not negate relative physics, because we live in our relative world currently, and so it's just one is meant to kiss and touch to the other and vice versa. They're just continuations of each other.
Well, he, coming from an esoteric standpoint, when you dive into the universal laws, and they are the laws that we live in this etheric plane. He was one of the major, forerunners that really started to bring that knowledge as fact and proof, where before, just like the law of attraction, some people think that that's woo woo, or no, that doesn't exist, that type of thing, but it is a universal law that is a fact that we live in. It just plays with the other universal laws, like the law of relativity.
Absolutely. Yeah, they all work
all
yeah.
of the other ones that I won't dive into, but he really started to prove that was fact.
Over and over again, he would.
Yes.
And that's the thing. He kept delivering, because once he got onto the truth, the seeker of gate 11, don't forget, gate 11 is looking at gate 56, the gate of the seeker. So his not self was seeking.
Yeah.
Let it seek. As we start to wake up to our nature, it's a good idea to use your not self to your advantage. It's not my pressure. So when I feel the pressure and I suddenly decide to accept that pressure and deal with it, I feel pressurized, but it's who I'm not. Let it run the thing. I have an open ego. I've got nothing to prove. However, if I'm on a big fat trip on something and I figured it all out, and you see all this excitement coming out of me, and some of that is leftover conditioned energy that wants to prove it, let it be called into the proving it part. You know what I mean? It's no big deal. You let the two, we blend out of one into the other, is what I'm getting at. We don't have a hard stop, like, we're defrosting ourselves over the course of a spell of time. So,
well, I have a defined ego, and I will say that there are some times that I don't, like I'm realizing that I'll say something and then I'm not capable of following through with it, or I'll make promises to myself. So, but with that defined ego, I do beat myself up because I didn't do exactly what it is that I say.
Right. And now picture that magnified. He didn't have that. Like, you don't have that. I would have magnified that beating up of self. Like distorted it through, amplified it through to the point of distortion, Now I'm not even thinking clearly. So he basically had the luck of the draw with all of that. I don't quite know what it was his upbringing was, but somewhere along the line he was privileged. Somewhere along the line he was relatively privileged as it relates to being able to be left alone to his own creative musings, because all that rightness in his variables was like an ocean taking everything in. And as soon as the formulas in the chalkboard and his hand was writing it, because don't forget, the motion of his hand would have been spelling out his ideas. They're unconscious. His unconscious mind was doing the writing, and while that was all happening, it would have called out of him the rest. He was a self-calling vessel of sorts, because of that rightness. It called it out of him. It pulled from him the depths that went into this ocean of his knowing. And an open head and an open ajna are always a sign of somebody who's going to pour through lots of books, lots of material, lots of stuff as they allow all the concepts to flow through. They're very academic in nature, or they certainly can be, because they're not latched on to one thing to study. You and I have defined heads. We're not latched on to all the various things out in the world, Jen. We're latched on to our few things. In fact, if you and I introduce another thing to one another, the other becomes resistance. It's like, hey, I'm latched onto these 3 things, okay? I don't know.
We have experienced that.
Yeah, I'll take 1/4 of that. That's it. Whereas he would be like, no, I'll take 20 of those. He would allow, all the things to come through. There were times when he would be under too much pressure from all of that. That gate 24 would return over and over to something he couldn't figure out, and he would wonder why he had a mystery he couldn't figure out. So before he came up with relativity, he was burning himself up at times. He went awful gray pretty quick. He might have done that to himself. I wouldn't be surprised. So externalizing the ideas that become the articulated guru and the prophet, the sage, the teacher, the person here to essentially externalize and ultimately make universal the impact of some new idea, the person of consequence. That's half of his incarnation cross. When we go over to the other side, that 36-1, crisis and conflict. Yay. That's what these gates are. So 36 says there's a crisis, and that's in his son. And gate 1 of that, so this gate of crisis, the darkening of the light, it's this rule of cycles that he figured out. He figured out because he didn't die young, because he made it through to the end and had formulas keeping coming out. That's how I know he figured out enough of it. Again, because he didn't live a miserable life. He didn't, he had nothing but the good, nicest things most of the time. But it's this rule of cycles in which decline is a natural but not an enduring stage. We have a genetic proclivity to come up against something, see it as a crisis. As we awaken more, we won't see it as a crisis. We'll just see it as movement in the emotional wave. It could be the opposite of a crisis. This is exactly the opposite of a crisis. This is the greatest thing. Well, that's not going to last either. That cycle is not going to endure. So it's this awareness that cycles, whether they decline or they're going up, is a natural but not enduring stage. Mostly right now we receive it as crisis. So decline. Right. This feeling of decline, we see it as we get it. It's a cycle, but we also get it. It's not an enduring phase. In fact, that's the exact way I teach the emotional wave to everyone. It's a cycle. It keeps going through, but it never endures. It always ends and ends us up smarter on the other side. Line 1 is resistance. You're going to love this. So it's 1, the authority, the authoritarian, as it relates to, that's what first line's their interaction with the others, authority, they're a chameleon as their behavior goes. They're just a chameleon, blend in until that foundation is set up. Do all my investigating. I got an open head, an open ajna, and an open throat. I don't even know what to say. I don't like it. I'm uncomfortable. My ego would like to roar. I need to investigate. I need to investigate to assuage the confusion and the stuff that runs through my open head center, making me not know what to think, not know what answers to get to. And it's a crisis. So I will become a chameleon. I will become the investigator. I will just sort of blend in. His blending into the patent clerk's office is, again, a perfect example. He just blended in. People hardly even knew he was there as he studied and studied and studied. By the way, he was in the right place. As he was watching patents come through, he was like, that's your patent, huh? And then he was like that kid in Good Will Hunting was the name of the movie.
Yes, that's
the chalkboard. It's like, so that's your formula, huh? Hang on a second. Erase it all. Make it different. And this first line is the energy and determination to persevere in the face of opposition, the emotional power to handle the crisis and stand off against the opposition. You're trying to tell me what to say? You know, I'm the authority here. And he knew he was the authority. But his fourth line wouldn't let him be rude, so he blended into the background, and he was just basically friendly about all of that. And mostly, you know, trying to get everyone to get along. That's what fourth lines do. They're always the great friendly friend makers. And so that first line became fixed in its nature as it relates to the fourth line, and he would be able to stand off against crisis. The crisis is other people telling him that's crazy, or him telling himself, "Am I ever going to get there?"
Right.
He's emotional after all, so he would go through emotional waves. I'll never make it, and we wouldn't know about that. He's a man. He wouldn't have shared that at that time. That's not.
He wouldn't have shared that.
Most likely, right?
He would have held that in.
And only a wife or a very close friend would know, or a mom when he was young, or maybe a dad. And then so that's the crisis. This is the cross of Eden. And then conflict, gate 6. So 36 is dying to get that experience to make the experience happen, to get it out of inexperiencing, let it become into form so I can experience it. That's what 36 is all about. That's the crisis of it. I'm inexperienced in knowing E equals MC squared. He didn't know yet. And then 6 is, in an emotional definition, 59-6 into the solar plex. This is the source wave. This creates the emotional wave. Our emotional wave pattern is generated. This is the channel of intimacy and mating. That's why I know, and it breaks down auras. Everywhere Albert went, he could break down their aura, even if people were literally trying to say, oh yeah, well, we're going to say this to him and that to him and this to him. As soon as he was in their aura, much like President Trump did, no one could ever really be mad at the man. President Trump had this as well. Lots of people have this. It was hard to stay mad at him once they shook his hand, got into his aura, because he could break down their aura. It's a genetic gift to achieve union. He was constantly achieving union with the next person he was friendly and networked with that was going to get him on the way to becoming influential with his ideas, by which his investigation was going to get through the crisis and deal with the conflict. This gate of conflict, this fundamental design component of progress, the law of growth cannot exist without friction. It's like birth. You know, you can't have a baby without feeling it coming out of you. You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly.
It's like friction, like birth is required for the passage through. So his is called retreat. So basically it's a friction to whatever is going on out there. That's why they call it conflict, because emotionally in a wave, it is a conflict. Hey, I got friction to you. I don't know. I got friction to you. I don't know if I want to let you in. That's a conflict. The other is, what the hell? Let me in. What the hell? Let me in. And he's like, no, I don't know. Friction, conflict, not necessarily. So first line of that is retreat. The realization that wasting one's time against overwhelming odds is not courage, but folly. The power of regeneration that can embrace retreat as a phase and not a failure. The emotional stability to accept conflict. Shazam, he lived that out. Now, the opposite of that would have been the emotional instability to fight with the conflict. And I'm sure he lived some of that out too. There's always yeah, but mostly he would just retreat. And it goes along perfectly with gate 12, caution, stand still. So stand still, retreat. You know, you see what's happening here? They're all making sense. This is a design of someone guaranteed to become influential, is what's the bottom line. And his ideas would just never stop. So gate 6 and gate 36 together make the emotional wisdom to get out of the retreat business and get back into the being and impact and a person of consequence. That's what his emotional awareness brought to him each time he went through his wave. Don't forget, his wave is both a level plane wave that'll claw your eyes out in one moment and be really elated at another. That's the source wave. And then the abstract experiential one, 4130, it just goes flying into the air. I did it. And then once it's done, it's all filled and it comes crashing down. So he would have seen that as not an enduring stage over and over again. Even if he spent a week sad in his, in his robe and his pipe or cigar, whatever it was, never leaving the house. I bet you he had days and weeks like that. I bet you he had a month like that somewhere along the way.
Yeah.
And the thing is, it's okay. Had he known, he could have truncated all of that to a much shorter time frame and had it be much more productive. But he was enough of himself to where his genius could become realized into the plane. Hey, you got this gate of ideas. And by the way, he's got a gate 17. So he was going to sooner or later articulate his opinions about those ideas. These are all concepts pouring out of an open mind system that is dying for the right timing to do what gate 8 and gate 31 want to do. They want to contribute their influence.
And the Saturn, and his 17 is in Saturn.
Is it? So Saturn. So yeah, so that would judge his opinions would be the judge into the other. And people didn't want to come up against that sometimes, or they wanted to challenge it, one of the two.
Well, Saturn would have made him do it, like Saturn's like the disciplinary. He's the father figure in all the signs. Like if you're not doing what you're supposed to be doing, Saturn will come and punish you.
Yeah, exactly. So if you're not obeying what Saturn is asking for, you're going to be punished. Yeah.
So if he has all that and he's been holding on to it and he's not articulating the ideas like he should, he's going to feel that. Yeah, he's going to probably, that pressure is going to increase from the head center down.
Absolutely. You know what? Since we're looking at it, let's do 17.1 real quick. I won't spend a lot of time on it. Gate 17, the gate of opinions. It's called following, the gate of opinions. The ancient law that those who wish to rule must first serve. And he lived that out.
Yes.
And don't forget, these are 9-centered rules. Our 7-centered rule was those who wish to rule must beat the tar out of everyone else. That's what the 7-centered version would and intimidate everyone else with an iron fist. The 9-centered version is, no, you must first serve in communion so that you can rule as a being that will. And the rulership is through the logic understanding, setting up the patterns that will rule the society. It's this. He's got a first line: openness, the energy to sustain a broad spectrum of stimuli. Yep, the possibility of having many opinions whereby it didn't matter if they contradicted. They'll settle themselves out. He's got a right-facing mind, a right-facing periphery, his view. He didn't need things to become logical at first. They could just settle themselves. I got a bunch of opinions. I got this one. Well, Albert, that one's the opposite of that one. Yeah, sure it is. Let's see what that looks like too. And you need that kind of inquisitiveness in order to do what he did.
Yes, you do.
He was designed to be smart. Just so smart if they allowed him. So his mother allowed him to be smart. His surroundings allowed him to be smart. You know what I mean? Right? If he was in a different environment and people weren't drawing from him what was there to make him smart, we would have never known about Albert Einstein.
Yeah, his IQ is around 160.
That just doesn't surprise me. Look at how many first lines there are in his body graph. There's 11 of them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
I've never seen more than 11 of any one line. That's the far most I've seen so far. There's no rule against there being 12, but 11 first lines. This person was fully engrossed and designed to be an investigator and a chameleon and just basically shut the flock up. He would just not say anything.
Well, from an investigator's point of view, what I have learned through my life is that when you do shut up, you can investigate so much more.
Yeah.
Because you're observing your surroundings and what other people are doing. You're not really paying attention if you're talking so much. So being that chameleon, and that is, goes into like the general aspect, or you can take from that because you're picking up your surroundings. You want to know what's going on.
Absolutely. So when these things are being picked up in all of his surroundings and all of his rightness on his personality side, the struggle he would have constantly kept having is that fourth line that beckons him to be friendly with everybody, make friends, befriend, network, externalize what you got, ultimately become fixed in that nature. You keep externalizing so that sooner or later you become influential. When I first started saying human design 14 years ago, I was not influential. But I stayed with it. And over time, that's the power of this fourth line when it's in an unconscious. And his was to teach the world. I mean, he lived out this. The incarnation cross of Eden is, oh my God, it's a crisis. We've been kicked out of Eden. You know, I now have to figure it all out myself, get through the crisis, share the idea, become a person of consequence, articulate this stuff, and keep sharing it. Share. Gate 31, gate 36, line 1 is in the collective abstract circuitry, so that's sharing. And gate 11, line 4, the prophet, the teacher, is also in that abstract collective. The keynote over the collective is sharing. So let me share my ideas through the crisis I just discovered. Let me share my crisis with you through the opinions that I can have many of, with the ideas I also have many of. Let me share my crisis, that because my old ideas, I didn't like them anymore, I totally changed them because I have an open head and an open ajna, and I want to share with you, and my open throat is expressing and trying to make me share with you. My totally open spleen makes me just want to be spontaneous, but I can't be. So let me figure that out too. So this is all the stuff that Albert would have been going through when he was trying to keep his mouth shut. He would walk into an aura for someone. He's got many ways to hook up his throat. There was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different ways, 7 different ways to hook up his throat. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Sorry, 7. So someone hooked him up. Every time he came into someone's aura, his throat would open up, and he could suddenly do all the themes that are in that throat. To be influential, to make a contribution, to articulate your idea and teach the other and become the prophet. All of this stuff to have all the details, to suddenly have the new detail. That's gate 62, to become stimulating with what he was about to say. So his biggest trip was, I'm trying to stimulate the logical community with what I have to say, and I can't figure out how to stimulate them. That would have been the source of his greatest emotional waves that would have poured through him and made him depressed, because he couldn't live out his incarnation cross in the beginning when he was unable to share his revelations. Boom. Yeah, that felt good. I like that one. Write that one down, everybody. That's a thing. So 11 first lines, this incarnation cross that will hold back and withstand the resistance of others and decide its right timing. Now we've got these 2 emotional channels that are there to make him incredibly emotional. So he was up and down on his emotional wave. He could handle the pressure of the other. He was a fighter, gate 38. We know that was there. And gate 27 off of his sacral made him care deeply about what the heck it was he was going to do. So you put all that in a sustaining generator, and you've got Albert Einstein. Can you pull up these? Actually, before you pull up the chalkboards, I want to show you something. So I want to move to his nodes real quick.
Okay.
So the nodes, they're both 4131. So the 4131 on his personality side totally resonated with everything. It resonates with the 1. It harmonizes with the 4. So he was wicked aware of his hunger, the foundation of what is it to become influential, the foundation of being hungry for the new experience. He was aware of that in him. Unconsciously in him, working away, was a trial and errorist. So again, gate 41, this gate that releases the energy to sustain a feeling. It's in a 3rd line, trial and error. I love how this equation feels. I love where this is going. I love this feeling. I'm so hungry for it. Oh, I want to be influential. I want to be an anarchist with this. The 3rd line's an anarchist. It's trial and error. It wants to try this and try that. And his trial and error was all in his head.
Yeah.
That's where it was. He had a way with his nodes guaranteeing him a trial and error process, which by he would investigate the stuff that he was hungry and desired the new fantasy to come true so he could be influential with it. And where did that trial and error show up? Do you have those 3 slides on one?
Yeah.
It showed up here on his chalkboards. I like the lower left one. That's a very old photo. And you can see that board has been erased so many times, you can barely read over it.
Yeah.
Tried it, throw it out. Look at the board up in the top left. There's several formulas that stand out. Right in the center, E equals MC squared. But the other 2, the bottom left one and the one that's sort of on the lower right, they stood out too. These were all important equations that he had that went along with E equals MC squared. This board was erased over and over and over again. Look at the chaotic mess. This is a trial and error mind. You know, the mind itself was externalizing and wanting to share, but in his way through life, it would turn trial and error as he would do it, and suddenly he would find his hands erasing it all to do it all again. So he lived out this trial and error way, but like a good first line that wants a good foundation, on the right hand side, when he finally had the foundation, what happened? All the lines are nice and neat. Here's the equation, people.
Yep. And I bet you he had that mark on his finger from the chalk.
Oh yeah. Guaranteed.
You know, you could always, back then, you could always tell a writer, because if they were dipping the pen into ink, they would have ink on their hands.
The good old days. So they're coming back, actually. Those good old days. So this is Albert Einstein's basically trial and error way. All showed up in how he was going to come up with the next new formula. And if you go back to his chart, the last thing I just want to point out to Albert would have been the things that would have driven him crazy, that, again, he probably wouldn't have shared so easily, are the ways in which his definition is split. He's a split definition. And since there's so many ways to hook up that ego, if you look at the ego, the channel of initiation, this warrior, with the gate of innocence on the other side, the love of all things. If you notice, he's got 3 of the 4 gates of the vessel of love. So he was real cool about his stuff. He was just, I love this. I love me loving this in my body right now. I love the feel of this chalk on this chalkboard universally to this thing that I can have any opinion about and have any idea about, and they can be conflicting until I figure them out. You know, a lot of people won't allow a conflicting idea until they work through one idea into another.
Yep.
His trial and error way allowed his mind to do that. So, but it's split off. That 5125 channel of initiation is in firing up this individual centered circuit. Part of being self-centered is split off. It doesn't go all the way through to the sacral. Look down 46. There's no gate 29.
Nope.
Yep. You go up gate 14. There's no gate 2. There's no gate 15. And technically 10 would have got there if you had a gate 34. 10 would have wrapped around down to 34.
Yeah.
And been part of the centering circuit. I have that channel. So because he had actually, those are the 4. So what that says is the not self theme of that is he wants the power of gate 34. He didn't always have it. He wanted to hop out of his fixed nature into even more extremes, but gate 15 wasn't there. So he wasn't sure how to ride the extremes of other things and other people. Gate 2, driving the direction. Gate 14 is there, and it knows it has the sacral fuel to drive a direction, but gate 2 is not there. It doesn't know which way to go. And then gate 28 is, I want to commit, but I don't have a gate 29. I can't tell what I'm supposed to say yes to so that I can apply that sustaining sacral energy that says yes to the experience. Gate 46, pushing upwards, is just dying to push upwards into the kingdom and have the experience in the body of whatever the thing is that his emotional wave is driving at that time, coming to clarity over and over again. But because that didn't always happen, I'll keynote his not self. His open head and ajna would start getting concerned with too many things. He can't tell what certainty he's supposed to have. All of that is fettered by the power that he's pissed that he doesn't have in gate 34, by the extreme nature of the world, which he wishes he could just fix into a fixed pattern and it won't fix itself. The direction he knows he's supposed to have, he can see it, he can taste it, but why isn't it there? And the commitment that he didn't have to make it all happen so he can go beat himself up again and flog himself because he didn't do any of that. Sometimes this was the not self trip of Albert Einstein, all inside his head, shared to very few, but shared to some.
Mm-hmm.
And when that stuff finally started to assuage itself and he realized his perfection, it turns out his fixed patterns pushing a direction of his love in his own body didn't matter what was pouring through, because his rightness of his variables and his fixed nature of his line 4 became influential. Sooner or later, after the crisis of the investigation had concluded, he concluded our world's investigation over time-space. Thank you very much. 11 first lines, Mr. Albert Einstein. You know, he was designed to do the world that service. And lo and behold, that's what he did.
Excellent job.
Kind of sexy, isn't it? I mean, dang.
He definitely lived out his design.
Yeah.
And I do feel like on somewhere on his journey, he did a lot of investigating in his internal world of what was going on.
Yeah.
He was aware of certain things that were going through him.
Yeah.
Over time, he mastered how to have them work for him instead of against him.
I wouldn't be surprised back in the day if Albert Einstein, with all that emotional definition, didn't, engage in certain, things that would have been frowned upon. Prostitution, prostitutes, groupies, this and that. 'Cause that's a lot of sexual energy inside of his body graph, inside of a generator. As a younger man, and especially as he was gaining fame and notoriety, that would have been a temptation of his. That would have been one of his Achilles heels in his moralistic view of himself. And then people are always like, how people are always like, hey, I don't want this open center. Why can't it be defined? Well, look at Albert Einstein's chart. It's a perfect example of what happens when these centers don't necessarily eat you up.
And he had that open spleen too.
Yep. Yeah, he didn't even know what to fear. There's not a single activation coming off of it.
Yep.
At least if you have an activation, you have an idea of what to fear. You got a theme for your fear, your primordial survival fear. He wasn't sure. That actually helped him. Not knowing what to fear meant it didn't matter that he went up against the powerful forces that may not have wanted him to be that smart guy. I want my guy to be that smart guy. Had he had certain spleen gates, he might have feared some of that, causing him to be less. He didn't know what to fear. And so you can have a pile of open centers and recognize the beauty. The open head in ajna allowed the wisdom to come in. No concept needed to be fixed. He didn't need to be certain about anything until it came out of him. He didn't need to express things all the time. He wasn't worried about what attention he did or didn't have after he finally got into his swing as his adult-ass self and figured it out. He just waited for the right timing to articulate. And then his generative motor would articulate with all the power he ever needed. Albert Einstein could speak softly and carry a great big stick. And that design made that happen. So don't dislike your openness. Love it. And for God's sakes, get your partner's ass self in here and get a reading. Or get yourself in here and book your reading. We got to get through and have this language for you. What I just did for Albert Einstein, I then turn into the language that I use for you. So you get to know yourself in this way. It's an amazing trip. And we spend hours at it. We don't skimp on time. Remember that.
Absolutely.
I'm
Let's
done
dive
here.
into the comments real quick.
Sure.
So Jessica says, this is so cool. I have the same defined centers, but what different people we are.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. It does express differently according to the individual and all the other parts that come into
Barbara.
play. Yep. I have my conscious sun and unconscious sun as a fourth line and in one other place, but I would consider myself a hermit. Do not want to associate with people.
Well, you can't have the unconscious sun and conscious sun both be a fourth line. Only one of them is a fourth line. So chances are you're a hermit on one of them. One of them's the second line, the conscious sun. Right? You can't have two fourth lines. They're always different numbers. But what was I'm sorry, I interrupted.
It's okay. She put in one other place, but I would consider myself a hermit. Do not want to associate with people. I cannot trust their thinking mainly. I can resonate with that.
It sounds like you're a 2-4 profile is what it sounds like, but I don't know for sure. And if that's the case, then this fourth line would mean that your network isn't providing the return energy. Yes. Investment basically means the people in that network aren't your people. Very wise, Barbara. That's exactly right. If they don't accept your sort of fixed nature on certain things, they're not the right people for you.
That came from Jessica.
Oh, Jess.
Barbara.
But yeah.
So I would agree with that. Well, excellent job. Thank you for all of that. And thank you for everybody who tuned in. As always, please make sure you like, subscribe, and share the show out. And if you haven't gotten your reading just yet, make sure you check the links down below or in the description and book your reading. Just like Dan said, book your couples reading, get your kids read. It's phenomenal, the information that you will find out about yourself and the people that you are really connected with. So
The stuff you will fix when you finally know.
Yep.
Well,
All right, guys.
It's a wrap.
Yeah, it's a wrap. We hope you have a wonderful evening, and we will see you on Sunday to wrap up the gates in the Throat Center.
Absolutely. Thanks, everyone.
Good night now.